When looking at the Dallas Mavericks roster, you can point out two things. One, we have some of the best players in the league with Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, and Klay Thompson, a three-headed monster in and of itself. But also we have a very young team with Luka Doncic, Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington all being around the same age, and even a couple younger players in Jaden Hardy, Derrick Lively, and even Omax. But with those younger players, their future might be uncertain, whereas Derrick Lively, he's going to be a cornerstone player on this team. His future is set. From what we saw in his rookie year, he's going to be a Maverick for a very long time. But then you have other players like Omax, who is going into his second year, hoping to carve out a role for himself with the team. He didn't really impress that much in Summer League, but hopefully this is a better year for him. But the other guy, Jaden Hardy, someone who's coming up into his third year, really doesn't have a defined role. Things didn't look that great last season. He did have some flashes. But in this video, we're going to take a look at Jaden Hardy and look over what some people in the community are saying about his future with the team, as well as an article that highlights what he needs to do to submit himself on this team going forward. But how's it going, everybody? My name is Marcel Martin. This is Mavs Digest, bringing you the latest news on everything Mavericks related. And before we get started with today's video, our likes, they're up and down. They're up and down. All I want to say is if we can get 300 likes in this video, I'd appreciate it greatly. I don't have to grow out my hair. My hairline goes all the way back here. But if you're enjoying the content, if you're enjoying everything that we're doing here on Mavericks Digest, a like would be much appreciated. But like I said in the intro, Jaden Hardy is a player who didn't get traded this offseason. He avoided any trade talks, any negotiations to try and get rid of him. He did stay. He is still on the roster moving forward. But this is a contract year for Jaden Hardy, and from what we've seen so far in his tenure with the Mavericks, he has a lot of talent. He has a lot of skill. He can play the game of basketball. But what is his role on the team? Because he isn't quite a ball handler or a playmaker. He can pass the ball. In garbage time, he can make things happen. But in the flow of the game, when things are much more needed of him, he really just scores. He attacks the basket a lot, which is fine. He can do that very well. He is somewhat of a selfish player. As a smaller guard, you may want more out of him. But that really is up to Jason Kidd on how he uses Jaden Hardy, and it's up to Jason Kidd to define his role and give him a role on this team, especially if we are now in that window of competing for a championship. We don't really need players just for garbage time. We need guys that can come in at a moment's notice if there's an injury, if a player isn't playing well. That next man up mentality has to be for all of our players, but not just that mentality, but that role. If someone goes down, you are the guy that I'm going to go to. And over the past few years, it's kind of been up in the air for Jaden Hardy, where he does fill in when players are hurt and he does play well, but it doesn't seem to be good enough to warrant a more solidified role with the team. Jaden Hardy is still a young player. He still has a lot of value for many teams across the league, but for the Dallas Mavericks, his value, again, is tied to his role and what he can do for the Dallas Mavericks. But if we just take a look right here, during an AMA on Reddit, Tim Cato was asked to give his thoughts on Jaden Hardy and his fit with the team moving forward. If you don't know who Tim Cato is, he's an inside reporter in the Dallas Mavericks, or for the Dallas Mavericks. Big name guy. I met him a few weeks ago. Really cool dude. Very insightful. So let's see what Tim Cato had to say about Jaden Hardy. Someone asked Tim Cato on Reddit saying, "What is the long-term plan for Jaden Hardy? With Spencer coming back, his role feels much less defined, and I don't want him to get lost in the shuffle." Well, Tim Cato had this to say, saying, "Educated guess, he's not on the team after the deadline. He's got one proven NBA skill at this point, three-point shooting, with inconsistent flashes of off the dribble playmaking and scoring. This year's roster makes the three-point shooting way more redundant, which makes it harder to see him carve out a role. I don't think he has a lot of league-wide value, but he's in a contract year and believes in himself, proving more in a larger role as any young player should. So a deadline trade may make sense for him." That's probably the case for the Mavericks too. I think Hardy can be a solid player, but I don't think his ceiling is so high that Dallas needs to hang on to him, and I don't know if this team's timeline aligns with him properly developing here. So let's unpack all of that. So I don't believe that Jaden Hardy will be gone at the deadline. I want to say that we do keep Jaden Hardy for the long term, and for one reason and one reason only, is that although I did say that we are a much younger team when you look across the league, we are one of the younger teams, but we also have a couple players that are a little bit older, like a Kyrie Irving, a Klay Thompson, even Spencer Dinwiddie, who will be most likely gone in the next 3 to 4 years. And if we don't, we didn't get rid of any of our first round draft picks, so we still have a good bit of draft capital. But if we have someone like Jaden Hardy, we can just hold on to him. We can just keep developing him, and he can slowly grow into that player to be ready to replace someone like Kyrie Irving, or even sooner replace a Spencer Dinwiddie. But that does all have to come with his own development and how he does just become an NBA player. The type of NBA player that we may need may not be the same as the NBA player that he does become. But as far as he doesn't have a lot of league-wide value, I'd argue that as well. A lot of young players have value just for the fact that they are young. There are many bottom feeder teams that would look at Jaden Hardy like, okay, I'll give you like a second round pick, or I'll give you my own young player that didn't work out for Jaden Hardy. We do a little swap right there. I mean, the Portland Trail Blazers, the Detroit Pistons, the Washington Wizards. I mean, there's a lot of teams that either they don't have a lot of picks or they just have an abundance of young players and trying to see what works out. Jaden Hardy could find himself on a team if the team were to trade him. But in my opinion, I don't think trading Jaden Hardy is a big concern for us. I don't think that's something that we need to do. He does fill a need as just being a good backup, if an insurance policy, if you will, if someone does get hurt. Jaden Hardy does bring value. He's not just some guy then on the bench that doesn't do anything. But it is important that in this upcoming season, and if we do keep him moving forward, is defining that role. Who is Jaden Hardy for the Dallas Mavericks? And if we just continue, on Twitter, they were making like a little chart over, for the Dallas Mavericks. Oh, who's the most underrated, overrated, who's the best? And as you can see here, Jaden Hardy was voted as most overrated. And I'm going to just leave it at that. I think that's crazy. I don't think Jaden Hardy is overrated at all. I think he's a very talented young player who just hasn't really been giving a shot to show not just the team, but the league, like, this is who I am. I am Jaden Hardy. This is what I can provide to any team. Whereas we saw with Derrick Lively, and although you can argue that with Derrick Lively, it was out of a necessity for that center position, that Derrick Lively was given way more of an opportunity than Jaden Hardy to show what he can do. I mean, Derrick Lively was able to play through all of his mistakes and learn from those mistakes and grow to become the player that we saw in the finals and throughout the entire playoffs. Whereas Jaden Hardy, it feels like he has been that garbage time player, that injury, replacement player, that it's nice to have him, but you don't think he's good enough to really have significant minutes with the team. It's very interesting to see. So, no, I don't agree with this. I don't think Jaden Hardy is overrated at all. And even shout out to Curse Muse, someone who's very prominent in the Mavericks community. He also had to disagree. He said, fully disagree. We need a guy who can come off the bench and score 12 plus points per game, and I feel like that's Jaden Hardy. As much as we don't like Tim Hardaway Jr., he was important by bringing 15 plus points off the bench. And that's true. We saw what Tim Hardaway Jr. did in the first half of last season before the real decline of Tim Hardaway. That, yeah, those 15 points off the bench, they were necessary. He averaged about 14 to 15 points last season, and it was coming off the bench. He was talked about early in the season last year as Sixth Man of the Year candidate. Why can't that be Jaden Hardy? Now, obviously, I understand with the way the roster is now. We got Najee Marshall. We got Quentin Grimes. We have a few guys that will be ahead of Jaden Hardy, especially in that position. But players like Dante Exum, who I'm not sure what his role is going to look like now that we have Spencer Dinwiddie. I don't know if Dante is going to be getting that many minutes, or if those minutes do go to someone like Jaden Hardy. That's to be seen. That's up to Jason Kidd to figure out, and I hope he does figure it out. But just continuing, there was an article posted that said this. One thing this young player must improve for the Mavericks. With additions in the Mavericks backcourt this offseason, what does the former Ignite guard need to do to break the rotation? Talking about Jaden Hardy. The article continues saying, last year, guard Jaden Hardy averaged 13 minutes per game for the Dallas Mavericks, scoring 7.3 points per game on a 49.2% effective field goal rate and shooting 36.2% from three on 3.2 attempts. Those shooting percentages aren't bad. That's pretty efficient in my opinion. They continue saying, though these stats are not particularly insightful without context, it should be noted that from the 2022 to 2023 season to the 2023-2024 season, Hardy saw a regression across nearly every statistical category. Of course, a primary reason for this was the acquisition of guard Kyrie Irving, but the dip in production goes beyond this one simple fact. With offseason signings of guard Spencer Dinwiddie as well as Quentin Grimes and Klay Thompson, the path to more minutes for Hardy has certainly narrowed. The question is, what does Hardy have to improve upon in order to remain a rotational player for the Mavericks? And I'd argue it isn't something that Jaden Hardy has to improve upon. I don't think it's something that Jaden Hardy has to do. Now, yes, his numbers may have gone down, but his numbers are still pretty good. Shooting, I'll throw it back up. He's shooting 49% from the field and 36% from three, even though it's on small attempts, not a lot of attempts. Those are still pretty good shooting averages, and I'm not upset with that. It's not about what does Jaden Hardy have to do. It's, will we give Jaden Hardy the shot and the chance to show what he can do? And unfortunately, when you're a team that's trying to win a championship, you don't have a lot of time to try and keep developing all these players. We already have a couple really young guys that are still developing, like Omax and a couple others. So Jaden Hardy being a little bit further ahead than the rest of the young guys, it's more just, do you have the opportunity? I know what Jaden Hardy can do. We all know what Jaden Hardy can do. But will he be given the opportunity to show that? But the article does continue. saying the most important area of improvement for Jaden Hardy is his efficiency when driving to the basket and limiting his turnovers when doing so. Against Minnesota on January 31st, Hardy had 5 giveaways, nearly all of which were out of control drives to the basket, which resulted in his mishandling the dribble or throwing errant passes. Some of these turnovers were due to his telegraphing the intended location of the ball when finding an open shooter, allowing the defense to adjust on the fly and intercept him. So that right there just kind of shows me that Jaden Hardy has the skills to be a good player, a good guard for the Dallas Mavericks. His IQ and just his decision making is what needs to be improved upon, which can be improved through the opportunity, getting more minutes, finding a role for himself. And so with all that being said, with all that I've showed you about Jaden Hardy, it's not his fault that he may not be on the team come trade deadline, which I don't think we'll trade him, but if we do, I don't think it's his fault. Jaden Hardy always tries his best. Even if it's garbage time, he'll play 10 minutes of play in a whole game where the majority of the minutes come from garbage time, and he'll finish with 10 points. Jaden Hardy has shown us in the playoffs, even especially in that Minnesota series. I know the article said in January against Minnesota he had a pretty bad game, but I'd argue there were a few games in the Minnesota series where Jaden Hardy looked very confident. I mean, Kyrie and Luka kept passing the ball like, no, attack the basket. He had a nice little, he drew a foul against Rudy Gobert just going right at him. He went up against Anthony Edwards and scored on him. Jaden Hardy has shown flashes that if you just fine-tune what he has already as a player in his skill set, he can be a good asset for a team. And the unfortunate part is we have too many players that are ahead of him, and I think the best thing to do is just to keep him. I'm not sure if he'd want to stay on a smaller contract or if he'd want to go for a bigger contract elsewhere. If that's the case, more power to you. Is your career. Jaden Hardy, I got your G League jersey hanging up. I would miss you. But if we are able to keep Jaden Hardy long term, I think it would definitely pay off in the next maybe 2 to 3 seasons, not even 4 to 5, maybe 2 to 3 seasons when some of these older players are slowly, retiring or moving on, and that spot for Jaden Hardy opens up. But let me know what you guys think down below. Do you think that Jaden Hardy will be on this team post-trade deadline, or do you think we just need to move on from maybe find someone better that fits or trade him for some draft capital? Let me know what you guys think down below. We can have a conversation. But that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for making this far to the video. Make sure to check out our Twitter and Discord. Links in the description below. Consider becoming a channel member. We are doing a giveaway. The winner will be announced next weekend. We'll do a live next Saturday. We'll do a couple names. It won't be just one giveaway. I'll do a couple. But until next time, y'all take care. Drink water. Peace.